So, Unit 2, Lesson 2. Today's topic is about capitalism. So, we're going to be analyzing what capitalism is and how it kind of led to this massive growth of industrialization in the United States and a massive growth of wealth as well. So, first of all, preview page. I want you to please draw this cartoon. I know it's a bit of a complicated one, but kind of get the big picture elements here. You don't have to worry about the little details like the bag here for lobbying and what's around his neck, and you don't have to worry about who this person is. It's more about the bigger picture of what he symbolically represents. So that's what I want you to be thinking about. And you also need to identify what is this building, who is this small fellow with the top hat on, and what about this woman? What does she represent? And then think even bigger, what is the big message of this cartoon? What is the cartoon trying to say about the relationship between this fella and these three individuals? So you're going to take some time to answer those questions. And if you have any questions about this, come ask me in class at a later point. For now, I'm going to move on to the notes. So topic today, once again, is capitalism. That's the objective. We're analyzing the effect of capitalism on the United States of America. First of all, what is capitalism? What's the definition of it? Well, textbook definition is simple. It means that an individual in an economic system can control the means of production. So any individual can control the means of production. So all the businesses in the United States, all the means of production. So think of businesses, think of factories, things like that, are controlled by individuals. Whether it's one person who owns a business, whether it's two people who own a business, whether it's a bunch of people who invest money into a corporation or partial owners of that corporation, it means individuals control that system. To simplify that definition, what does that mean? It means you, as a student at this school, either when you graduate high school or maybe today, your choice, you can open up a business, maybe open up a food truck, open up a restaurant of some type, and you can hire workers and you can sell a product to people and you can make money from that product, and then you can expand that business as much as you want and try to compete with other businesses to make as much money in this economy as you possibly can. That's what capitalism is. It means individuals control it. But capitalism is really important because it incentivizes people to want to work hard, to want to achieve wealth. And from a business standpoint, too, it encourages businesses to always get better because they're always going to want to sell you a new product. You look at Apple, they didn't just release the first iPhone and call it a day. They continued every single year to improve their iPhone so that you would want to buy a new one. And they had a competitor, Samsung mainly, as well as other competitors too. Every year they release a new phone, and they're always trying to one up each other and prove that they either have the better quality technology or the bigger, fancier screen, things like that. That's good because that ensures that society is progressing, that technology is progressing. So that consumerism, that growth of business, that competition is actually overall very good for the economy. There's obviously negative effects to unregulated capitalism, which we're going to be talking about, but it's a good thing overall, this idea of incentivizing people to own businesses. And so we're going to be comparing capitalism to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is socialism, and that's when the government controls everything. And when you look at the effects that communism had in the Soviet Union and in East Germany as well, there wasn't much progress in manufacturing during that time period. The cars they manufactured at the beginning weren't much different than the cars that they manufactured several years later because there's no incentive. There's no reason to use ingenuity, no reason to improve that product. That being said, there's good forms of socialism. This is a public school that's owned by taxpayers. So that's not a privately owned business. It's owned by the public, which is technically socialism. That's actually a good thing. The interstate system is also a form of socialism. It's owned by taxpayers and maintained by taxpayers. It's not owned by a private business for profit. Police departments, fire departments. So, in reality, we're not a truly capitalist society. We're what you would call a mixed market economy. Anyways, moving on. Capitalists during this time period, the big business guys, they're going to prefer laissez-faire economics. That's a French word that means allowed to do. And so their philosophy, their belief is that the marketplace should not be regulated by the federal government at all, that the government should stay completely out of business. So limited government, small government. This cartoon right here is kind of an example of that. You see a John D. Rockefeller quote: "The American beauty rose can be produced in all of its splendor only by sacrificing the early buds that grow up around it." What's Rockefeller trying to say? Well, other than calling his business the American Beauty Rose, uh, Standard Oil, uh, perfected the process of drilling for and producing and distributing oil. He was very good at what he did, and he put everybody else out of business. And so he justified the fact that his business stood out amongst all the others and became as large as it did because he was harder working than everybody else and he was smarter than everybody else, which, by the way, that is social Darwinism. So they used social Darwinism to justify their wealth. That basically they took the concept of survival of the fittest and they applied it to business, and they said, my business is the best business, and I was smarter and harder working, and my business survived. So through the process of natural selection, government does not have the right to intervene with the marketplace, that the best businesses will always control the marketplace. And they also kind of use this social Darwinism to once again justify their massive wealth. The idea being, they're rich because they're smart and hardworking. Poor people were just too dumb or lazy to figure it out, basically. So moving on to the next slide, as far as the industrialists and the robber barons go, the capitalists who got too powerful, like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, who we're going to be talking about next, they became known as robber barons. So they were looked at as almost being criminals because the way they achieved their wealth, the way they expanded the size of their companies, they used tactics that wouldn't really be legal today. So we're going to be talking about that. First of all, they would make their companies so large that nobody else could compete with them. So they would form what is known as a monopoly. So a monopoly is a business with complete control over its industry, and you do that by buying companies that are competitors to you. So you buy those companies and you either absorb that company or you completely shut it down. Your choice, depending on how you want to take advantage of that. But that's the idea. You consolidate the industry so that you control the whole thing and you set the prices, you make the product, and you make all of the profit. Which, tying it back into the last slide, what makes capitalism so great is competition. And when you have a monopoly, you don't have competition. There's no one to challenge you in making a better product. So in many ways, the formation of monopolies is almost as bad as communism in the sense that it stifles that ingenuity. It stifles that advancement of technology and that advancement of things. And once guys like Rockefeller monopolized too, he fought tooth and nail to keep the electricity industry and the light bulb industry from taking off because he wanted to continue lighting the streets using kerosene. You even see that today. Oil companies will lobby against solar power and against wind power because they want to be, able to continue to make a large profit off of oil and coal and natural gas and things like that. And they view solar power as competition, and they want to try and prevent that from happening as long as possible. Um, all right. You should also know trusts, by the way. They're basically the same as monopolies. So when I refer to trusts, I'll usually be referring to a monopoly. But a trust is an agreement by several companies to form one large corporation. So at the top, it's mostly controlled by one company, but it looks like several other different companies overall. That's basically the best way to describe a trust or a monopoly. They're both relatively the same thing. Only difference being that the monopoly would be one company, the trust is several companies, all owned by one person, more like a pyramid. By the way, if you think about modern day marketplace, if Verizon wanted to monopolize the cell phone industry, who would they buy? And the answer to that question would be they would try and buy AT&T or T-Mobile or things like that. Now, AT&T and Verizon are the two biggest ones. It's likely that the government would block that if that were to happen today because there wouldn't be enough competition in that case. But once again, back then, laissez-faire. The government wasn't stopping people from consolidating their businesses and taking over and monopolizing the market. Moving on to our next slide, go ahead and begin copying this down. But It is also important to consider that there are legal monopolies. So in Tampa here, most of us get our electricity from TECO, Tampa Electric Company, and that's a monopoly. It's a legal monopoly. It's highly regulated, but it's allowed to exist because it would be inefficient to be running electrical wires all over the place from all these different competing companies. So that's a case where it makes sense. Water's the same way. You either get Hillsborough County water or you get Plant City water if you live out here in Plant City. And City of Tampa might have its own water too, but I'm not sure. But they all provide water to their own area. They don't run through each other because once again that would be just a waste of resources to be running those pipes everywhere. Um, I think back where I lived in North Carolina, it was the same thing. Duke Energy controlled all the electricity for the area. There wasn't any choices there. So these are legalized monopolies, but they're highly regulated. Uh, let's talk about these two guys, Rockefeller and Carnegie. First of all, John D. Rockefeller, he created the Standard Oil Trust. And so he went from controlling 3% of the market in 1870 to 90% of the market within 10 years. How did he do that? Well, he paid very, very low wages towards his workers, and he drove out the competition by underselling his oil. You see, Rockefeller had a lot of money, and he could get away with selling his oil at a loss. So he would actually sell it at the point where he was losing money, but he was thinking long term, And so what he would do was the other companies they could not compete with his prices. They eventually went out of business, and then he would either buy them up or shut them down. And that's how he gained 90% of the market. He was ruthless. Uh, Today, obviously, his company was eventually broken up by the U.S. government, which he fought against. And what's left of that today is ExxonMobil, which is in Houston, Texas. They have a big headquarters there. But even other remnants of his family's wealth would be Rockefeller Plaza. You probably have seen the Rockefeller Christmas tree. It's famous. His family, they built that whole section in New York City. So his wealth continues to affect us to this day. Carnegie also is another guy who's a famous monopolist. He's a rags to riches story. Grew up poor, became extremely wealthy through the production of steel. He used something called the Bessemer process to mass produce steel, very high quality, very cheap, very efficiently. He produced steel, and he's going to monopolize the steel industry through two forms of integration. There's vertical integration and horizontal integration. And so with vertical integration, you buy out your suppliers, the coal fields, the iron mines, the railroads. And what's good about this for him is he can take that iron ore and basically produce it for what it costs to produce it for himself, but he can sell to other steel companies at a much higher rate, and so that gives him a competitive advantage right there. So thinking modern day terms, Verizon Wireless, to use the cell phones as another reference. For them, vertical would be buying LG or Samsung, somebody who makes a specific telephone as opposed to the service. He also bought out competitors through horizontal integration, so that's buying other steel companies, or Verizon buying AT&T for a reference point. All right, last slide as far as the notes go today. The government did try to begin breaking these up with the Sherman Antitrust Act. However, it failed pretty miserably. It made trust illegal because they killed free market competition. Once again, killing free market competition is a bad thing because you don't have competition, you don't have choices, you don't have ingenuity. However, the robber barons had excellent lawyers and they were able to fight this, and they basically were able to find a loophole that said that the act did not clearly define what a trust was. All right, last thing you're going to do, I want you to think about Microsoft. So I've been talking a lot about cell phones. Now I want you to think about Microsoft. You're Bill Gates. You want to monopolize aspects of the computer industry. Keep in mind, Microsoft is a software company. So what would be horizontal integration for expanding software? And then think vertical integration too. What else does Microsoft do? You can think about multiple things, by the way. There's obviously Xbox. There's software production. They do make some hardware in the form of tablets. So you're going to take some time to answer these questions. And once again, if you have any questions, come talk to me in class. All right. Well, that would be it for today. So thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.